welcome to my channel. My name is None of Your Business, but you can call me BizCoon. And today we are reacting to a video by Blooms entitled South Park Fan Theories Are Dumb. Now, for those that don't know, Blooms is a content creator that makes video essays about South Park, as you can clearly see by the title. Within the thumbnail, he says that they're pointless, which is a very interesting take to have, given that people are always coming up with fan theories about all sorts of different media, from movies, books, games, TV shows, and the likes. I mean, even to this day, people are still coming up with theories about the movie Coraline, even though it's like, I think it's a standalone movie that's like several years old at this point. So it makes me wonder if South Park is somehow just different in that regard. But whatever the case is, we'll see just how dumb these fan theories might be. I mean, knowing how South Park works, it wouldn't surprise me if they were to make fun of fan theories. I don't recall that any episodes where they do point out fan theories. I mean, they had the episode about 9/11 conspiracies, but I don't think that really counts in this context. But either way, we're going to see exactly what Blooms has to say with regards to fan theories about South Park and whether or not they are as dumb as he thinks they are. So without further ado, first, let me do this real quick. Be sure to leave a like, not only on this video, but check out Blooms' video after this, or actually, you should probably watch Blooms' video first before watching my video, just so you could show some support. But either way, let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Number 15. South Park's Dark Secret. What if South Park is all
I see exactly where this is going.
like a purgatory, and the only way they can move on from purgatory is by it's because they can't move on from purgatory.
Oh, wait, no, this is literally the Ed, Edd n Eddy theory, where all of the kids in the cul-de-sac all died at different points in history, yet they all seem to be, like, quote-unquote friends with each other. I distinctly remember how most of the characters died according to the theories, and then there's also the Rugrats theory, where all of the Rugrats are just figments of Angelica's imagination. Is that what he's getting at here? Because honestly, I could see South Park doing something like that just as a joke, as I had mentioned earlier in the video, but let's continue.
Because they're too stupid, but the kids are smart, so they're more like, the kids are actually angels, and they're training people to move on from purgatory. And I heard this theory from a homeless guy in front of CVS when I went to pick up my medication.
Ah, so like the Majora's Mask Ben Drowned thing. Some guy got it at a garage sale, and it just said Ben Drowned. And I'm sure we all know the story of that. Well, if you don't, you should probably look it up on your own.
If there's one thing I love on the internet, it's theories about cartoons. Not because they're interesting or good, but because 90% of them are so dumb that they are incredibly entertaining. South Park is not immune to this. With such a huge amount of episodes and lore, it should come as no surprise when I say that this show has an infinite amount of fan theories. Now, the thing with theorizing about South Park in particular is that when you question why the show made a certain decision or why something doesn't add up, the answer pretty much never comes from putting together pieces of lore like a puzzle and analyzing the underlying themes.
Yeah, that's the thing with, like, shows with, like, actual overarching stories, and not just shows but games as well. Like, I know that Steven Universe comes to mind. Like, there's still, like, theories about that show that we don't know, like who made the gems and who made the diamonds. And then in terms of games, Kingdom Hearts usually comes to my mind. Like, what's inside that black box? Or what are Demyx and Luxord's real names? Just, Things like that, those types of theories make sense because they're based on an overarching narrative that has a set beginning and end with all sorts of lore and stuff. But when it comes to something like South Park that tends to be episodic, without that much of an overarching storyline, except in during the 2016 election cycle with the whole PC principle, the ads, Garrison becoming the president and all of that. Granted, people had mixed feelings when that all happened. I remember that they had to redo the entire season because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. And so they had to just redo the whole season. Which, but in some regards, it's actually one of those seasons that's aged pretty well, especially with regards to this most recent election. But with regards to a show like South Park and its very loose continuity, obviously having fan theories is all fine and dandy, but sometimes people might end up looking too deep into them.
In fact, the answer is pretty much always the same. Matt and Trey forgot, or they thought it would be funny.
You could say the same thing about a lot of TV shows of that nature, where early on they'll bring up a certain plot point and then it gets forgotten about later. And a really good example of this is with the King of the Hill character Luann. Within the first season, we saw that she's a really good mechanic, working on not only Hank's pickup truck, but Cotton's Cadillac as well, to which Cotton, I almost said Con, but Cotton didn't think that a girl should be doing stuff like that, because, if you know, but at least here they're willing to admit it, or even if they're not, at least it's something to keep an eye out for.
They are more than willing to overlook continuity and lore for the sake of comedy, and as we will see, most of these theories are results of this. But because of this, it's very funny to see people attempt to solve the mysteries or extract a deeper meaning from the show when it's obvious that they were never intended to be mysteries in the first place. My personal favorites are the quote scary theories, when they try to tie themes from the show into a dark or disturbing thing from the real world.
Yeah, pretty much what I mentioned before with the cartoon theory creepypastas. I had mentioned Ed, Edd n Eddy and Rugrats, which are the two that I always think of at the top of my head.
These are borderline creepypastas, and I love them because the scariest thing about these is how many people buy into them. They remind me of the South Park analog horror series I reacted to on my second channel. Feel free to check that out and subscribe, because I do intend to make a video where I read South Park creepypastas on that channel very soon. But
maybe we should do that if my channel ever gets popular enough. He had mentioned something, and I was going to comment on it, but wait. Sorry, I don't remember what it is. Here, let me see if I can rewind it and...
about these is how many people buy into them.
Yes. Yeah. I actually don't remember. I might cut this part of the video out. Sorry about that.
They remind me of the South Park analog horror series I reacted to on my second channel. Feel free to check that out and subscribe, because I do intend to make a video where I read South Park creepypastas on that channel very soon. But today, I thought it would be fun to go over some of these fan theories to figure out which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones are just downright stupid. Mostly the last one, because that...
I just remembered what I wanted to say. Now, I said to myself that I might cut it out of the video. I was going to say that a lot of creepypastas that do exist, a lot of them tend to be so over the top that they're not even scary. They're more comedic, if anything. I've read some creepypastas of some, children's shows, and I remember laughing my ass off just reading them because of just how absurd they are and out of place they are, that people come up with these and kind of take them seriously. If any of you know who Yuri of Wind is, he's made video game content way back when. I don't know if they're still active, but they had a little series called Bullshit Creepypasta Time, where one of the creepypastas that he covered was the Sonic.exe creepypasta. I'm pretty sure a decent amount of you know what that is. And one of the most common features of these creepypastas is hyper-realistic blood. Because, blood is scary. I mean, it's scary. I mean, people get really queasy around blood, but it always has to be hyper-realistic. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
That is the vast majority. Oh yeah, and stick around to the end because I may or may not have created my own theory about this show. So make sure to lock all your doors and turn off the lights because things are about to get spooky. We're going to begin with the theories that are more well-made and somewhat plausible before we move into the really bad ones.
You said that it's going to get spooky. Are we going to have Barbara Streisand and spooky vision? Maybe I should do that in the video.
Theory number 1. Cartman knows Kenny dies due to an eye transplant. It is a known fact that
what the hell? When was this ever established? I mean, there's the episode where they tried to build a ladder to heaven to meet Kenny, and Cartman, well, I don't remember if it was that episode that Cartman did it, but Cartman drank Kenny's remains, thinking that it was chocolate milk mix, and he started having visions of Kenny's memories, and then Kenny started speaking through Cartman, and I can imagine something like that. I wonder if he's going to tie it into what happened there.
Cartman is one of the only people in South Park that remembers Kenny dying. This theory suggests that it may be because he has Kenny's eyes. In Season 3, Cartman received an eye transplant and Kenny was the donor. Because of
Oh, I see. The thing is, there's so many episodes of South Park that it's hard to remember all of them, except for some of the more iconic ones.
This Cartman is literally seeing through Kenny's perspective and is able to recognize his deaths. Now, I actually kind of like this theory. I think this is one of the better ones because there definitely is evidence to suggest that this might be the case. I mean, like I said, we know that Cartman knows about Kenny dying.
What, Kenny? He dies all the time!
Yeah, pretty much.
Aside from that one line in Cartman Land, he was also one of the only people that wasn't there when Kenny told everyone in the Coon and Friends trilogy about his immortality. And
Right, yeah. Kenny himself has mentioned that he has this superpower of constantly dying and coming back to life.
Of course, we've never gotten an explanation as to why Cartman knows that Kenny dies. But realistically, I think they just included this line because they thought it was funny, and they probably didn't even remember the fact that...
Of course it was funny. Did you hear me laugh a minute ago?
Cartman has Kenny's eyes. I would say overall this one's a decent theory, but there's just not really much to say about it. Despite how frequently it was requested, I'm not going to be talking about the theory that Cartman is secretly in love with Kyle because I'm saving that one for an entire dedicated video event.
Oh lord, no, we're gonna react to that one for sure.
Eventually, so stay tuned for that. Theory number 2. South Park is the Okay, I'm not gonna do the voice, this is just getting annoying. According to this theory, the entire show is just a retelling of events from Butters as an adult talking to his therapist. Now, the logic behind this is that because Butters is so easily manipulated and gullible, he's not really one to question what people tell him, so he's believed all this time that all the wacky, insane stuff that happened did actually happen, and of course he's in therapy because of the many, many times he's been traumatized throughout the show. Now, the problem with theories like this one is that you can kind of do this with anything. Like, yeah, it could be Butters telling his therapist about this as an adult, or it could be older Cartman telling this to a therapist and just keeping in all the lies. Or maybe these are the stories told by the crab people who have been watching from the shadows the entire time.
Crab people. Crab people. Who were disguising themselves as gay men in order to make all of the men of South Park metrosexuals.
And they tell their kids these stories. You see what I mean? It's kind of like a dream theory where you could just say, oh, it was all a dream, or oh, this...
It's always a dream. No, let's be real. If anyone knows a King of the Hill episode with a dinner with onions, or a dinner of onions, I don't remember the actual title, but from what the characters have said regarding the book, it seems that the first 2 chapters of the book were a dream.
This is all taking place in Kenny's mind, who's in a coma. I just feel like stuff like that is kind of lame, and...
like the Ash is in a coma theory for Pokemon. I don't really know that much about that theory, since I don't really watch Pokemon, but I feel like that influence of that probably has to do with all these coma, it was all a dream type theories, or at least maybe popularized it to some extent.
And even though you can't really disprove it, there's also not really any evidence to suggest it to be true. Now with this one though, I do have one piece of evidence that pretty much shuts it down entirely, and that's the fact that Butters wasn't even really a character until like season 5. So why would Butters be telling his therapist about like 4 seasons worth of the boys' adventures? Like,
oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, sometimes, that's the thing, you'll find something that sounds compelling, but then you'll find this one thing that puts a hammer in it.
It just makes no sense. This one, in my opinion, is a pretty bad theory. Now, because of the fact that Kenny died so long with pretty much no explanation, it shouldn't be surprising that a ton of theories speculate about Kenny. And we already talked about the eyes one, so let's go through some of the other most popular ones. Theory number 3, Kenny dying triggers a loop that stops the characters from aging. This theory is saying that basically whatever is causing Kenny to be revived, whether that be Cthulhu or any number of things, it's also keeping the town young. Basically, every time Kenny dies, time gets completely reset to before he died. So it keeps everyone the same age, but it allows them to retain any of their memories or experiences that happened during that time, which
Better than Timmy's secret wish from the Fairly Odd Parents, where, according to that episode of Fairly Odd Parents, Timmy made a wish with Cosmo to prevent everyone from aging so that he could keep his fairies for essentially all time, and that it was made 50 years before the show takes place. Now, this obviously puts a huge damper on the whole Channel Chasers special, where it shows Timmy all grown up in with a seemingly successful life and 2 kids and stuff. But the show was already going out to pasture after that point, so there's not much to talk about in that regard.
Which would also help explain why none of the kids feel like kids anymore. Now, this is a fun theory, and I like this one, but there are definitely some glaring issues with it. Firstly is the fact that they have gotten older. Stan started off the series at 8 years old, and now he's 10 years old, despite Kenny dying several times in that time frame. And another more obvious one is the fact that Kenny doesn't die very often anymore. For seasons 18, 19, and 20, Kenny did not die one time in any of those seasons. So
well, that certainly puts a damper in this plan.
So if this theory were true, we would see them age at a normal rate during that time until Kenny dies again in season 21 and they reset back to before that. So I think this is a really cool theory, but unfortunately it's just not true. But that kind of leads us into our next theory, which is that the reason Kenny's parents are poor is because they have to pay for so many funerals. Now, this one is pretty self-explanatory, but there are a few things to note. First of all, we have only seen a handful of on-screen funerals for Kenny, and the fact that they had those funerals for him at all suggests that maybe they do give him funerals every time he dies. But one of the problems I see with this is the fact that Kenny's parents remember every time he dies because they have to give birth to him again every time.
Right. Literally in that that Nambla episode is where it was pretty much established.
God, this must be the 50th time this has happened.
Take a second.
And I feel like logically, if you knew that your kid died all the time and came back and no one remembered it, why would you keep having funerals for that kid every time he died? I feel like by the time you got to death 4 or 5, you'd just be like, all right, well, he'll be fine. I need that money for groceries this week. It just feels like a bit of a stretch to say they give him a funeral every time he dies. Not to mention the fact that his dad is unemployed and they're both alcohol and drug addicts. It's not really surprising that they're very poor. Now, you could argue that things like medical expenses cripple them financially even more, but I really doubt that funerals are the reason that they're so poor. Now, there's one popular theory that Officer Barbrady is actually just an idiot and is pretending to be a police officer and everyone just goes along with it, kind of like he's like a Make-A-Wish kid. But obviously this theory is from many years ago because in the more recent seasons it has been proven that Officer Barbrady actually is a police officer, so not really gonna talk about that one. Now, one of my favorite theories, and probably the best one in this video, is the theory that Kenny stayed dead for all of season 6 because his mom was pregnant with Karen, his little sister. Now, if you don't know, at the end of season 5, Matt and Trey decided to kill off Kenny permanently because
Yeah, this was a whole thing that happened. I had mentioned that Cartman once drank Kenny's ashes, and it was in the context of Kenny's temporary permadeath.
of this, he was dead for the entirety of season 6 until the very last episode when he just shows up with no explanation. And Karen, Kenny's little sister, just randomly shows up one day in season 9 as a background character. We had seen Kenny's family many times at this point, and there was never any little sister in the picture. So since we know that Kenny is reborn by his mother every time he dies, this theory says that the reason he wasn't reborn in season 6 is because she was pregnant with Karen. Now, the only problem that I see with this theory is that the timelines don't really add up. Like, when we first see Karen, she's the same age that she would be for the rest of the series, which is 6 years old, and obviously season 6 and season 9 were only 3 years in between. But besides that, I actually think this is a pretty good explanation as to why she even exists and why Kenny wasn't revived during that season. Now, obviously, the real answer is that Matt and Trey just thought Kenny should have a sister at some point so they could evolve his character more, and they didn't really think twice about just throwing her in there because they really don't care that much about continuity. But
I was going to make another Fairly Odd Parents comparison with Chloe, but I don't think it really fits in this context.
regardless, I actually really like this theory, and this is probably the best one. Another really popular theory is that Stan's parents, Randy and Sharon, are actually half-siblings. This is because Stan's grandpa, Marvin, has the last name Marsh, which is obviously Randy's last name, but there are times in which Sharon has referred to Marvin as her father.
Sharon, isn't that your father?
Oh,
this
well, how the tides have turned.
Could indicate that Marvin is the biological father of both Randy and Sharon. Or, the more likely likely option is that it's not very uncommon for people to refer to their father or mother-in-law as just their father or mother. Or the even more likely option, he was originally intended to be Sharon's father, and then they just made him Randy's father for plot purposes. I mean, this would be far from the first time they changed someone's name. Butter's dad.
Right. Yeah, he's about to mention Butter's dad be having the names of either Steven or Chris, to which another YouTuber who covers South Park, Kitty Monk, likes to call him Steven Chris.
Was originally named Chris before he was named Steven, and Jimmy's last name was originally Swanson before it was Vollmer. So it seems most likely to me that they just changed their mind about whose father he would be. So that's pretty much the end of the semi-credible theories. Now we're going to get to the really dumb ones. For some reason, there is a very popular theory that suggests that South Park is just purgatory for idiots. The evidence for this theory being that no one ages, the adults are all idiots, and Satan and Jesus are very prominent characters. The idea is that the children are actually angels who were sent there to learn how to deal with idiots, I guess.
The children are angels. In what way is Cartman an angel? That is what puts a hole in that. If all the kids are angels, then what does that make Cartman, basically? See, I already figured it out. I'm just saying.
All the while, Jesus and Satan are fighting over the souls of the adults to get them to go to heaven or hell. Now, there are many issues with this theory, but the person who wrote it decided to try to explain some of the more glaring issues. For one, the character Chef is an adult, and he's not an idiot, so they explain it by saying Chef was an older angel who became addicted to mortal pleasures like sex, but
Isn't that like the plot of Panty and Stocking? Like, they were angels in heaven, but they ended up... I don't actually remember the plot of Panty and Stocking. I just know that they were sort of fallen angels.
He's still a good person, so he was banished to South Park to learn a lesson or something. Okay, well then what about the fact that the children are clearly not angels, including specifically Cartman, who was outright evil? Oh, well,
Okay, let's see what they have to say.
Cartman actually just became too indulgent in human pleasures like unhealthy food and entertainment, so he became corrupted.
Okay, so yeah, literally Panty and Stocking, basically.
Basically, this theory is saying South Park is a purgatory for idiot adults, except for the ones that aren't idiots, and all the kids are angels sent there to learn a lesson, except for the ones that aren't an angel and clearly will never learn a lesson. And what would be the point of having a purgatory for idiots specifically? Is there a reason that you would separate them from the normal people? It just makes no sense. Not to mention the fact that we've seen both heaven and hell in the show, heaven being exclusively for Mormons. So
right, I was going to mention that, but I wanted to wait a little bit. Yeah, it was the Mormons. Yes, the Mormons were the correct answer, and everyone else is gonna go to hell. But the thing is, hell in South Park is not that much different from Earth. It's just really, really hot.
What is even the point of any purgatory? If you're Mormon, you go to heaven, and if you're not, you go to hell. It doesn't seem like there is a purpose in having a purgatory with such a binary system. This is kind of one of those theories I talked about earlier where it's just kind of nothing. Like, you're not actually speculating on anything that would impact the show in any way. Again, it would be the same as saying, okay, well, what if this was all a dream? Or what if this was just in someone's head in a coma? Like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, these kind of theories always seem appealing on the surface, but then you look into it for like half a second, and you realize you can just do this with anything, especially if you're willing to make exceptions for the rules that you made in your own theory. It's just kind of lazy in my opinion. But that leads us into our next theory, which is that Professor Chaos is a coping mechanism for Butters to help him forget his father sexually abused him. It helps make him feel powerful when his parents make him feel weak.
Is this in reference to Butters' special episode where Butters went to that place that his dad went to where he was jacking it, but not in San Diego? And so he told his mom about what happened, and so his mom tried to drive him into the river or the lake or whatever to drown him. Is that what this is? Because I don't remember Butters' dad trying to abuse him in that regard. I mean, Mr. Garrison wanted his father to abuse him in that regard, but I guess we'll see where this is going.
Okay, so first of all, it's not really a theory that Professor Chaos is a coping mechanism for Butters. That's just what it is. It's a coping mechanism for Butters, and they basically explain that.
And yet nobody accepts me. I am an outcast. The shadow of a man who can find no companionship.
But the weird part about this theory is that there's just nothing to suggest that Butters was ever sexually abused by his father. Now, we do know that his parents are abusive in general, including physically abusive, and there is even evidence to suggest that Butters may have been abused by other members of his family.
I just see that and I'm like, wait, what? South Park is crazy.
My Uncle Bud did that to me once.
And
oh Lord, come on. No, what if... No. If you're going to make a theory like that, then you should at least be lore accurate. He made Professor Chaos because of the abuse he got from his uncle, not his dad.
Obviously, Professor Chaos is one of Butter's coping mechanisms for all of the abuse and trauma he has suffered. I just don't understand why they would randomly throw his father in there as being a sexual abuser when there's just nothing to suggest that. This next theory speculates on why we can't hear what Kenny says in South Park, and I'm just gonna read the whole thing. I think we can't hear Kenny to reflect that society rarely hears the poor and mostly listens to the upper middle class. Notice we only hear what he says without muffles during the episodes in which he is in a mask. This is to symbolize that the lower class must disguise to grab attention from the upper class. The Coon and Friends episodes also shocks us in that we don't even realize Kenny is Mysterion until it is said so by Stan. Kenny is just like everyone else, except he doesn't have the same opportunities, so he isn't hurt as much. You see, I never really thought about it like that, because this entire time I've always just assumed the reason that we can't hear Kenny is because his coat is covering his mouth, but I guess it must be because he's poor and is stifled by society or whatever.
I mean, I can see how that's symbolic, but we all know it's just because he has the coat.
This theory just reminds me of the idea of the curtains were blue. Now, don't get me wrong,
So what the author meant, what your English teacher thinks the author meant. For instance, the curtains are blue. What your teacher thinks. The curtains represent his immense depression and his lack of will to carry on. What the author meant. The curtains were fucking blue. This is basically the inverse of Death of the Author. I think that's what it's called. Where the author or creator of a story does have their own interpretation of what that story is supposed to mean, but they would prefer that others come up with their own interpretation. At least I think that's what Death of the Author is. This, on the other hand, seems to be the inverse, or I guess the opposite of Death of the Author.
all for overanalyzing and speculating on things like this because it's basically what I do on my YouTube channel. But like, do you really think that's what Matt and Trey intended when they came up with Kenny's character? I think
it reminds me in the scene I mentioned King of the Hill episode with the Dinner with Dungeons, where they were talking about how like the lighthouse represents, I don't exactly remember what they said everything represents, but I do know that whenever she cooks for her father, she cries. And it's not just the onions.
the far more likely answer is that Matt and Trey just wanted to say stuff they couldn't say on TV and get away with it. And not to mention the fact that we know Kenny is based on a real-life person that Trey knew in his childhood. A kid that was notably hard to understand because of the big parka he always wore and he was poor. So
right.
I feel like that's a better explanation. Another theory is that Mephisto created Man-Bear-Pig, which kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that he is obviously a genetic scientist and creates all these insane creatures, but the one thing that I would say clearly disproves that is the fact that this creature only has one ass as far as we know, and we know Mephisto's trademark is multiple asses. Next theory is that PC Principal is secretly a conservative, he just uses the PC as a cover.
That's what people say about the YouTuber Shoe on Head.
You know what? I totally agree with this one. And I have a theory that Randy is actually not an idiot. He's just been pretending to be an idiot as cover for some reason. Like, what does this even mean? PC Principal came into South Park when nothing was PC at all. So if anything, it would make way more sense to pretend to be conservative as a cover. Like, what does it even mean when you say as a cover? Now, a theory I could get behind about PC Principal is that he's just using PC in order to pick up chicks, which they kind of talk about in that one episode.
Right. That's something that they did, that they pointed out within the episode itself. Jimmy did a hit piece on PC Principal and his fraternity about how they were using PC ideology in order to get laid, which obviously PC Principal was not a fan of.
Wow, you're really progressive.
No other way to be. So, listen, I think you're really pretty and interesting, and I'd kind of like to take you upstairs and totally crush your pussy. Would that be acceptable to you?
So, I mean, that makes a little sense, but I don't get why he would be cosplaying as PC and be secretly a conservative. Another bafflingly popular theory is that the 4 boys represent the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
That's what, there was this point in time where I went down this one rabbit hole where I remember watching a clip of the former CEO of Yahoo was talking about these media giants being the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I don't remember which ones they were off the top of my head, but maybe they'll come back to me.
The first 2 are pretty obvious, with Cartman being Conquest, given his desire to control everyone and everything. Kenny is Death, because obviously. And this is kind of where the theory starts to fall off the rails, because then they have Kyle listed as war, which, I mean, I guess makes sense because he's very passionate about the topics he covers and he's always fighting with Cartman. So, I mean, it's a pretty big stretch, but kind of makes sense. Which, of course, leaves Stan to represent famine, because without him, the rest of the group would be starved. What does that even mean? I mean, I don't think Cartman would be starving anytime soon if Stan was gone, so it just makes no sense. And I don't even get what the point of making a theory like this is. You're basically just saying, yeah, these two fit perfectly into it. And then this one, I mean, it kind of fits. That one doesn't really fit, but I mean, it still could be representing the... Like, what is the point of that? I just don't understand why theories like this with such glaring issues even...
Oh, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the SpongeBob Deadly Sin theory, where the 7 of the characters represent different sins, right? SpongeBob is lust, Gary is gluttony, Patrick is sloth, Sandy is pride, Squidward is wrath, Mr. Krabs is greed, and Plankton is envy.
Even get popular in the first place. Like, this one isn't even complete. They literally say that it doesn't even really make sense that Stan is famine. And I just love to imagine the people writing this, like, what did they think Matt and Trey were coming up with when making the show? Do they think they were just sitting there going, this comedy show about 8-year-old boys really needs something. It really needs to represent something, you know?
Yeah.
What do you think? Got it. 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. That's what they're going to be. And I know I'm being kind of an asshole about it. I know that these are just people wanting to have fun and theorize about the show. And I don't even really fault them for them not being perfect. It just doesn't really make sense to me how these get so popular. And this theory is very similar to another theory, which says that the boys represent Freud's states of the psyche. Stan represents superego with his...
Hang on. This Loki actually works.
goodness and a desire to be a good person. Kyle represents ego with his justice and thoughts of vigilance. Cartman represents ID with intrusive thoughts of meanness and bigotry. And Kenny also represents ID with sexuality and lust. Now, the glaring
It's pronounced id, by the way.
issue with this one is the fact that 2 of the boys represent the same state. You would think that if this were intentional, they would have picked something that had 4 different states instead of 3. But honestly, I think this is just a result of the way the show is written and the fact that each of the boys have very distinct character traits that interact with each other in different ways. I mean, it just makes sense that the characters have these traits because the whole idea is that these states of psyche kind of contradict each other. And when you write a show like this, you need each character to have their own distinct personality traits so that their interactions are entertaining and interesting. I mean, you could probably apply this to any group of characters from like any show ever and it would just make sense. So then another theory says that Randy actually has a crush on Mr. Mackey.
that honestly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there is the episode where he and Gerald, I don't exactly remember what they did. They were in a hot tub and they showed each other's dicks. One of them pleasured themselves while the other watched. I think that's what happened.
When you think about it, they're both adult males and incredibly rich. It only makes 100% logical sense. Oh my! So I can't even think of like any interactions between Randy and Mr. Mackey. So I don't even know. I just thought this one was funny. This theory says that Stan and Kyle are actually secretly related, and again, there's no evidence to suggest this, and they don't provide any. I only included this one because someone replied and said they kind of wish this was true, so people would stop shipping them.
Frickin' tweaking Craig all over again.
To which someone else replied asking if they thought that would actually stop them, which, very true, I think it would only encourage them. One of my personal favorites is that Timmy isn't disabled, he's putting it on to get away from poor behavior.
Isn't that... No, literally, that's literally the plot of Le Petit Tourette, with Cartman pretending that he had Tourette's syndrome. That's literally the plot of that episode.
No, this is not what I think of disabled people in the real world. This only applies in this twisted and hilarious universe called South Park. Thank you, sir, for clarifying that this is not, in fact, what you think of disabled people. All right, now I'm just going to rapid fire through these last few ones. Cartman's half-brother was recruited by the CIA for espionage and destabilization of nations.
What? Did he just... Oh my god, no. Where did he find these? Did he just have a poll on Twitter or something where he just came up with the most ridiculous... Oh my god, the microphone is not picking up my laughter. If you can't hear me, I was laughing my ass off a little bit ago. Maybe if I bring it closer.
I would assume they're talking about Scott Tenorman, which is the only half-brother we know, and I mean, there's no evidence against this one, so this one is definitely true. This theory says that Kenny eats turtles.
The opposite of that one kid who's like, I like turtles.
So, okay. This one says that Randy is actually secretly Lord,
Everyone knows that. There's like a whole story arc about this.
which I'm not sure about that one. That one seems pretty preposterous to me. And finally, the most insane theory of all of them, Pip isn't French. Okay.
The microphone isn't picking up my laughter, and I hate it. I needed to pick up my laughter. I need you guys to laugh with me.
Okay, well then how do you explain this?
Yeah, go away, Pip. Righto. God, French people piss me off.
Alright, so I've had a
Oh my god.
good time making fun of all these theories, but who am I to criticize when I haven't even written my own? So,
Oh, here we go.
what if the entirety of South Park has
Look how he's using this low-res picture here. Oh my god, no, it just doesn't stop.
just been the boys' journey through the layers of hell? Before the show even started, all 4 boys died in a freak faith-healing accident, and the show chronicles their journey as they descend through hell. We begin in the first layer, Limbo, where Kenny is at for much of the first season, dying and being revived constantly. He is heavily grieving and downright terrified as he can feel the lack of the presence of God, as we can see in this clip from Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
Well, fine. You go ahead and miss church, and then when you die and go to hell, you can answer to Satan.
Kenny is eventually able to move on from Limbo into the second layer, Lust, which he gains access to through cheesing. There's plenty of sex and violence to go around, so he's willing to stay there for a while. We then reach our next layer, Gluttony, through Cartman. His constant meals of powdered donut, pancake surprise, and toaster pastry chocolate milk mixed butterballs are so vile that they could have only been crafted in the darkest corners of hell. Here he also experiences downpours of black snow. He is able to move on to the next layer, Greed, in which he is constantly looking for new ways to make $10 million. His quest to become rich is a metaphorical representation of those who are forced to push boulders in this layer, as despite his greatest efforts, he's never successful in making the money. Meanwhile, Kyle is trapped in the 5th layer, Anger, where he is constantly arguing with Cartman and locked into eternal combat with him. In the 6th layer, Heresy, is Stan, who plays the role of a false prophet by telling people he can speak to the dead. As punishment, he is trapped in Hellfire, provided by some of Hell's most ruthless demons.
That's right. We're going to bring about our Lord and Savior, Satan. Hail Satan!
7th layer, Violence, sees the return of Kyle, where he is once again fighting with Cartman. He is forced to swim through a boiling river of bodily fluids because of this. In the 8th layer, Fraud, all of the boys meet up to run their startup company, the Washington Redskins.
Washington Redskins, go fuck yourself. Because it's time for the Washington Redskins. Go fuck yourself Thanksgiving special. It was either Thanksgiving or Christmas, I don't remember.
But they don't spend much time there and quickly move into the final layer, Treachery, where they are punished for their countless betrayals of each other and God himself. Their punishment is being eternally trapped in a frozen, icy town known as South Park. This is where Satan himself resides. But why were only some of the boys punished for their sins at certain layers when several of them were present for these sins? Well, that's because they're actually all being punished, and they are forced to relive these moments endlessly in their minds, which is why Cartman can be fighting Kyle on one layer while being punished on a different layer. The Cartman Kyle is fighting is simply a hellish recreation of his memories. And why did they experience these layers of hell out of order? And what about the fact that they have met Jesus himself during the show? Well, that's just because.
It's because I said so, that's why.
Theory really changes the way I look at the show because it's actually much darker than you might have thought. Thank you for watching.
I don't know, guys. That seems pretty legit. I mean, would you really stop to think about it?
See? I told you it was lazy.
Okay, no, that was freaking fire. That was hilarious. No, I'm looking at like OBS and the mic was not picking up my laughter. Just know that where I start laughing and then there's silence, that was me laughing. And I'm trying to like get closer to the mic, but it doesn't pick all of it up. But either way, no, that was a good video. That was freaking hilarious. But yeah, let's go ahead. We'll leave a like on the video to show our support, and you guys should go ahead and go show your support too, and until the next time, take care.